All right, it's 3:31. Would like to welcome everyone to the platooning breakout session, one of the last ones for the PA-AV Summit for this year. I'd like to welcome everyone. My name is Kevin Tobias, and I will be your moderator today. I'm the Administrative Specialist in the Office of Transformational Technology for PennDOT. And I would like to thank you all for taking the time to listen to our fantastic lineup of speakers for this session. Just a few housekeeping items before we begin so that everyone's aware. This session is being recorded and will be available to the attendees later this year. You will also see that your microphone has been automatically muted to reduce any background noise, but please feel free to use the chat function on the right-hand side of your screen for any general conversation and comments, but probably most importantly, using the Q&A function or section to ask questions about the presentations and of our speakers. There will be a panel discussion following the speakers' presentations, and I will be pulling questions from the Q&A section. So if any questions are posed in the chat, we may miss them. Also, please feel free to upvote any questions that you see there, and they basically get put to the front of the class, and those are the questions that we probably will get to first. Let me first introduce our first presenter today. We have Elise Feldpausch. She's with the Michigan Department of Transportation's Connected Vehicle Department, and she serves as their Connected Vehicle Specialist. Her full bio, as well as all the other speakers, is available in the Summit program and on the Summit website. So, Elise, I will hand it over to you, and looking forward to your presentation.
Excellent. Thank you so much, Kevin. Can everybody hear me just fine? We'll go with yes for this. So I am going to be speaking to you. You're probably wondering why, someone from the Michigan Department of Transportation is here speaking to you at the PA-AV Summit. I'm the current chair for the Smart Belt Coalition team, which is in association with Pennsylvania. So we are going to talk about truck platooning beyond the technology here. I'm going to go ahead and share my screen with you all. And today, as we start talking through this, you're going to notice, really as we want to start looking at what is this idea of the Smart Belt Coalition? How was it founded? What was the situational awareness that led to this larger initiative associated with truck platooning? So just wanting to take a minute, first also a housekeeping rule. This is my first attempt in utilizing a new feature in PowerPoint, which showcases closed captioning at the bottom of the presentation for those that may have challenges associated with their hearing. So this is, again, first time that we're being able to utilize this here. So I'm excited to be able to have a more inclusive presentation to share with you. And we hope that there are no hitches associated with that. So we'll have a good grace with this and we'll move forward. So again, just wanting to touch a little bit on what is the Smart Belt Coalition. So we are abbreviated by SBC. And this was established to really look at fostering collaboration involving research, testing, policy, standards development associated with all the organizations that you see here on your screen. So it is very much focused on connecting kind of those Rust Belt states, Pennsylvania DOT, the Pennsylvania Turnpike, Ohio DOT, the Ohio Turnpike, and the Michigan DOT, as well as all those research entities that are associated with this as well. So the Smart Belt Coalition very much focuses on connected autonomous vehicle technology and the goal of promoting safety, enhancing mobility, strengthening economic competitiveness, improving the quality of life, as well as enhancing the workforce and ensuring that standardization and interoperability. So why we're here today is to talk about a demonstration that occurred last October. So about a little over a year ago. We did this project where we identified this need, right? We wanted to focus very, very much on the freight movement. You can see here, I think this is a very common image that's used partially because it is very, very impactful around this idea that long haul truck traffic is really kind of the lifeblood of the nation. And you can see very much right here in this blue circled area that this Smart Belt Coalition area is very, very heavily ingrained in this kind of long haul trucking. And we really wanted to set this demonstration apart and showcase it not only from a, yes, hey, we want to do this demonstration to show that this can be done, but really look at the idea of having a demonstration that spans multiple agencies and crosses those borders. Because when you are looking at long haul trucking, it is really about moving from more than one agency. So really trying to showcase, the differences, the potential gaps, and then start to identify solution practices for working corridor shape. So really, we did this demonstration in partnership with Lochrane, and Lochrane, who I saw was a sponsor of your event today. We were very, very excited to be able to work with them. They came to us through an RFI, and we were able to really start to work with them with this larger idea of this truck platooning demonstration. So you'll see here on this screen, we talked through a number of different focus areas, right? This whole idea of gaps and the ways in which we can really showcase and trying to do this in a very holistic and smooth way and not do it as a bunch of very separate agencies at the same time. So partially, to be able to do that is this idea that we needed to request data from the various agencies and really engage those law enforcement pieces. Now you'll start seeing data as being a very, very common theme throughout the rest of these slides as we start to look at best practices, even gaps that exist, and lessons learned moving forward. But this all started with this idea that Lochrane needed the data to be able to do the platoon in the best way possible. So really focusing along those ideas of excessive grades, curves, poor pavement quality, shadow persistence in very specific areas, amongst a variety of other options. And so as we kind of look through this all was around how can we do the most automated way possible. So ensuring that the ADS would only disengage when it was absolutely necessary. And so this is an image here. You can see we really went from the greater Pittsburgh area community food bank. We stopped at the Middle Ridge Service Plaza up through Toledo and came out at the Forgotten Harvest Food Rescue Organization. So one thing you may see here is that, we really wanted to give this demonstration a purpose. We didn't want it just to be a demonstration for demonstration's sake. We really wanted to look soup to nuts at what it truly would be like if this really happened in real life. And part of that was this focus around wanting to show there being, equipment or food in the vehicle, items that you were actually having being delivered, and trying to walk through what would that look like as you were engaging, disengaging with the freeway, as you were starting to do this whole idea of unloading and offloading and looking at it really from a holistic standpoint, and really wanting to showcase that, because that is very much a part of this process, and very much I think there's a part that gets ignored generally with these types of demonstrations. It's all very much, very freeway focused, and we really wanted to show what is this in a very holistic way. So as we kind of started looking through, there was a lot of lessons learned that came from this, which is the whole focus of that demonstration. It wasn't just making it happen. It was, let's learn from this. What can we do, right? And so it happened very, very early on in kind of our demo establishment process that we understood that the coordination of this across the multiple agencies were really crucial, right? This idea of reevaluating to ensure that our timelines were well linked to be able to establish a path forward for communication in a timely way. Really looking at the way in which various organizations, executed their platooning efforts was another area that was very heavy focus. And we learned that certain agencies required more information and other agencies required less information. So we ultimately, in our demonstration, very specifically went with PennDOT's plan because it was very holistic in what they wanted to see from a platooning operation perspective. So we utilized that across the board, and all the agencies agreed that that was the way that we wanted to move forward. Another piece of the pie, I mentioned before, is this kind of data need, focusing very much on the necessary data and not so much on what is beneficial. We started seeing, we want all of your data. And, those of us that kind of live in this data spectrum know very well that when you start asking for everything, it makes it very, very difficult to get any sort of equality associated with everything. And so we really wanted to focus and looking back, focus on what is necessary. What do we absolutely have to have in a prioritization associated with that data? And then very much kind of learning to speak the same language and looking at, we as infrastructure owner operators, we speak very differently about kind of those data needs, and we understand the limitations associated with some of those data needs, where the trucking community maybe has a different language set that they utilize for those same requests and the differing data associated. And so it was very interesting to start seeing the information that was wanted versus what the various agencies had available, and the different quality data sets that were available for that, because there are differing organizations that have different needs and have different resources to implicate in the ways that we do our data acquisition and collection. And some of those more snapshot in time data sets, things like high shadow areas or pavement quality, is not necessarily something that is collected in a real-time way across all of the data areas. So really focusing on kind of that data standardization and the understanding of that common language. And I'm going to move pretty quickly here through the last bit of the operational lessons learned, because I want to ensure that I leave enough time for our other illustrious speakers here. But moving forward through this, focusing on these infrastructure conditions. Infrastructure became obviously very important from the infrastructure owner operator side to really make the platooning demonstration successful. And you can see here that this is something that in these particular areas with our very specific kind of weather patterns that are associated with here in our lake effect snow that can come across, and that can be very challenging for the pavement condition quality. And that was something that was a very, very valuable kind of lessons learned, is that the emphasis on traditional roadway and infrastructure management as critical for widespread adoption and use of this technology is something that we very much need to focus on as we move it along. The other piece that was, very focusing was the weather. That was obviously a very big piece in wanting to ensure that, we're exploring all of the V2I applications that supply road weather conditions directly to the vehicles, because we wanted to be able to give as much real-time information with regards to the weather to be able to ensure that the system remained engaged as much as it could. So weather, another very crucial piece. Then obviously work zones. There's a lot of dynamicism associated with work zones, and wanting to showcase the ways in which the ADS systems were able to kind of work in and around those work zones was something that was very crucial. Obviously, another big piece of the success of these types of demonstrations is the engagement within the community and the engagement throughout the organizations and your law enforcement, and ensuring that all of the different agencies that manage your roadways are able to be engaged and really understand what you're trying to do, but then also utilize it as a learning opportunity to be able to bring it forward to them as something that they can be able to engage on, that this is coming and they need to learn about it. So we were able to utilize a number of our stops along the way as those kind of educational opportunities as a part of the demonstration, and really work them in rather than, trying to keep them on the outside or have them at the very, very outreaches of this demonstration. Another thing, I think that if we were to look at doing this again, there are some considerations for executing this. And while the purpose of this effort was to identify the opportunities for cross-jurisdictional truck platooning and ADS operations, these are lessons that were identified for conducting a platooning demonstration, which I know is something that, we are starting to see more regional effort associated with these platooning demonstrations, and really trying to look at, okay, we know this isn't something that is very agency specific. We know this isn't something that even internal to our own states, we have a lot of cross-agency boundaries, and really trying to understand, as this technology becomes established and it becomes the way of the future, what can we do to be able to coordinate this from a more holistic perspective? So with that, I'm going to end my slideshow, and I believe we are going to be moving on to our next speaker. So thank you so much all for your time, and we'll answer questions here at the end, I believe. Right, Kevin?
That's correct, Elise. Thank you very much for your presentation. It was, I mean, I kind of have a firsthand knowledge because I was really able to take part in this demonstration, and thought it was really neat. I thought it went well, and really thankful to everybody who participated. Again, please remember to post any questions you have in about Elise's presentation or any of the other speakers we will have, and vote on those questions that you would like to have answered in the question and answer function on the right hand of your screen. Our next presenter is Dr. Taylor Lochrane. He is the Federal Highway CARMA Program Manager. Dr. Lochrane.
Alrighty, so thank you all for the opportunity to speak with you. Very exciting conference summit that you guys have had here today. And this discussion I want to kind of share with you is what we're working on within CARMA and what we refer to as one of our first use cases, basic travel. So the two things, again, to touch on, first, CDA and the CARMA program. So this past year, SAE defined a new standard called the J3216, which helped define levels or classes of cooperation for highly automated systems. And this is a very fundamental piece within our program. We worked closely with SAE through our ITS Joint Program Office in helping support the development of this standard, which was developed through the ORAD committee that created this definition that we can all start to use now as we talk about the capabilities between our systems and being cooperative. And so again, think of this standard as helping define the machine-to-machine communication between entities so they can share data and do things together. That's kind of what this standard helps us identify. And we really are the first to successfully demonstrate CDA at Federal Highway Administration. We just completed our demos for this first batch, which I'll go through, including basic travel at ACM this summer, this past September. So pretty excited. I wasn't able to have the videos ready. They're actually in production right now, but we'll be releasing those publicly soon. So keep an eye out for those videos as they come out to help showcase some of the capabilities that this technology really can provide. And so when we talk about the CARMA program, how does it relate to CDAs? We're really looking at this, automated driving technology and the vehicle to everything communications world and saying, how could these systems work together? In Federal Highway, our role is really looking at the role of infrastructure in supporting and enabling this automation. And so our program within CARMA, we're focused on developing the tools that can help us answer these questions. That what if the system could get information from the road infrastructure? Could that information be valuable in making better decisions? Could the system be providing information to the road infrastructure, and could that help transportation operators make better choices and decisions on how we're operating and managing the system as a whole? So we have a lot of really good tools within our product line that are all open source that we use within our research program, and lots of programs across the country that as well as adopted them, and we're developing together in this open source community, really learning together. I think that's the value that we have. And one of the areas we have is really focused on collaboration and how we've can really look at this technology together. So the first 4 use cases that we completed, it was really good to see Elise's presentation before us, because a lot of what they're looking at is what we're also looking at in trying to understand what the role of infrastructure in supporting work zones and weather and traffic incident management and our basic travel. And the basic travel use case includes vehicle platooning. But we're not only just looking at the vehicle platooning operation, but we're kind of looking at it from the entire trip. And I'll walk through a little bit more on what basic travel focuses on, but here's some 2 snapshots of some of the demonstrations that we did on campus in demonstrating the ability to automate the move over law, help improve first responder safety by first responders' vehicles providing the information of virtual lane closures so that highly automated systems approaching a scenario could move over and slow down, as well as work zones, providing that work zone data information of what to expect. It gives the opportunity for a highly automated system to understand that it could be outside the ODD and could reroute, or to know what to expect, that there could be a lane closure ahead and we're going to cross the median and drive on the other side of the road to use the other bridge because the bridge in front of us is under maintenance. So we're looking at a lot of these ideas and really trying to focus on, again, the role of infrastructure as infrastructure owner operators. How best can we support and enable this technology to operate safely and more efficiently in our transportation system? Upcoming this year, we have a lot of tests that we're going to be doing on arterials, looking at all-way stop control, fixed traffic control, adaptive signal control, dynamic lane assignment. So we have a lot of ideas on how the infrastructure can be doing some really unique things and providing some really interesting mechanisms in which we could have collaborative systems between the traffic signals and highly automated systems. We're also looking at integrated highway prototype, which is a flavor of what I'm going to explain for the basic travel, but we're really enhancing it with the levels of automation and really focusing on the traffic management center's capability to provide specific rules that could enable these systems to operate better and more efficiently from a transportation system perspective. We have a project with our partners at FMCSA and MARAD focusing on automated port drayage. We're doing our demonstration with that first port drayage proof of concept in Orlando this November. And of course, FMCSA is focusing on work zones and emergency response with their ACE program. So we're partners with our other modes within USDOT to help really understand and how they can use the tools to focus on improving the operations of the system. A new project that we just awarded, and this could be very valuable to those folks that really have a passion for vulnerable road users. We're looking at how the infrastructure can really help support and identify locations of vulnerable road users to help improve the safety. And so we have a product called CARMA Streets, which is an edge compute device that will help us share cooperative perception information of what's going on at an intersection. So as a highly automated system might be approaching, could use that information to plan better trajectories moving forward. Also, we'll be looking at advancing port drayage at a 1/10 scale, and then eventually moving into a real port drayage experiment with our partners at MARAD in 2023. So focusing on the basic travel use case, again, it wasn't that we wanted to only focus on platooning, but we had to get on the highway to do platooning. And so we wanted to look at a couple of different use cases for how we are going to merge on the highway. How do you form the platoon? And then how do you, and how the infrastructure could be providing rules to help manage the flow, such as speed harmonization. Or maybe there's a bridge ahead that is an older bridge, and we want to limit the platoon size for that specific bridge. There could be a role that infrastructure could play in helping support the management of those different types of activities. And so that's what our first initial proof of concept was aimed to do. Was to develop this capability and understand how this could work, to help us understand where this could move forward into the transportation system. And so we used the different products that we used, CARMA platform, and this was a passenger vehicle experiment with our light vehicles. CARMA Cloud, which is a software that we use to represent the traffic management centers, as well as CARMA Messenger, which is our way of kind of emulating a connected vehicle. And so we were able to look at cooperative lane change, a cooperative lane follow, following some algorithms that we've used and developed within our research to enable platooning. And so as you merge on the highway, this is a vehicle-to-vehicle application where the vehicle is communicating with the other vehicle on the on-ramp where this trajectory is going to be, so that it can plan its trajectory to fall in behind the vehicles that are on the highway lane. In this scenario, of course, it's a V2V scenario, but we're trying to advance that and then looking at how could the infrastructure be supporting these merging capabilities. So we're kind of looking at it from all different angles and how this technology could support the merging on a highway and how the highway system could support these highly automated systems. And after the vehicle then merges on to the highway, the vehicle then will fall into the rear of the platoon that's passing by. It timed it right, so it fits in perfectly. And then as the vehicles are driving, they form the platoon. They have a leader-follower scenario. They're operating under specific conditions that are provided by CARMA Cloud. So we set the platoon criteria for that string of road, what the platoon size is, what the inter-platoon gap would be. And that's what we made available for that roadway. So the vehicles use that information to form their platoon and to operate on the highway at their leisure. As the platoon was moving forward in the platooning process, we then would implement a speed advisory to implement a speed harmonization function to enable the platoon to slow down from 55 to 45 as we're starting to manage the flow of traffic. So again, all these different types of capabilities that we were releasing to the vehicles, we weren't controlling or commanding these vehicles. What we were doing is really just posting the new rules of the road, and the vehicles would receive those rules, and then they would have to best determine how to apply them to meet those rules for safe driving. And so there was a lot of really interesting things. We have a lot of video footage of conducting this experiment at ACM in the month of September. A lot of really good results. We'll be posting all the data on the Secure Data Commons data exchange within USDOT to help provide all that data that we learned. And again, we're going to continue moving forward. Our next big platooning activity would be under the integrated highway prototype, which we're looking at a spring-summer demonstration for that activity, which would include our newer platooning algorithm and concepts. For that, if you want to get involved, we have a couple areas for CARMA Collaborative to engage with us in work groups as we write software and as we work together to understand how CDA works and how we can best apply it, as well as our CARMA support. So if you have any technical questions, feel free to email our engineers. We're standing by to help answer all your questions and help you get started. So with that, I would like to pass the mic back to the next presenter. Time.
All right. Thank you, Dr. Lochrane. That was very interesting stuff. Look forward to more to come in the future, I guess. Again, let me just remind the audience that if you have any questions, please post them in the Q&A. Again, any for the presenters. Again, to upvote those questions that you want to, as I said, go to the head of the class, and we'll try to get to those questions. Our last presenter is Gregg Troian. He is the president of PGT Trucking, and I'll pass it on to Gregg.
Thank you, Kevin. Good afternoon, everybody. I'm Gregg Troian. I'm president of PGT Trucking. We are based in Pittsburgh, not too far from Lochrane, and we would probably be looked upon as a practical user on a regular basis of this technology that Lochrane has developed. Next slide, please. Thanks, Elise. I think it's important, before I talk about why we partnered with Lochrane, to talk a little bit about our company so you can put things in perspective as I go along. PGT Trucking is a flatbed carrier transporting about 50% of our commodity is steel. We operate with a number of different companies, underneath a holding company that we control. PGT Trucking is the largest. Next to that, we have a company called Southern Pines, which specializes in cryogenic tank transportation, as well as heavy haul, high, wide, and very large dimension movements. Liquid Logistics is based in New Jersey and provides service into New York City and back out again. And PGT Services is an entity that provides brokerage services. Next slide, Elisa, thanks. This is what our equipment looks like. These are the commodities that we transport on a regular basis, metals being predominant. Next slide. The volume of transportation or shipments that we make is reflected in this slide. About 200,000 domestic shipments, about 4,000 international shipments. That would be into Mexico and also into Canada. We have over 1,000 unique customers with 1,100 state-to-state origin destination pairs. And what that means is lanes, a from and a to. Next slide, please. So you can see here that we cover pretty much North America with our fleet. Next slide. We do have some concentrations throughout North America, that being Northeast and Atlantic and the Midwest, Southeast region, and West and Northwest regions. So we aren't transporting necessarily everywhere throughout North America from extremes. We have regions that we operate within. Next slide. That brings us to the rationalization, I think, for Lochrane. You also see a note there on a company called Nikola. We've recently signed an agreement with Nikola, which is for us a hydrogen fuel cell electric powered truck. We ordered 100 of these vehicles. On the Lochrane side, we've ordered 1,000 of their units. Next slide. And you've seen these pictures before. This is what the locomotion equipment looks like. Next slide. This is a little redundant because I think you all know what autonomous relay convoy is. For us, it's not too much different than what Elise described. Next slide. There is a progression from when we start to where we ultimately want to be. This slide just shows the progression in the timeline from when we first start these units on sometime in second quarter of next year to the ultimate arrangement where we're beyond startup and we're into regular use of autonomy and autonomous vehicles. Next slide. This is where really what I'm really here to talk about, and that is the dense lane of steel movements for us between Pittsburgh area and Chicago area. This is where we'll start our autonomous relay convoys. These points represent origin points for picking up steel that is destined on one hand from the Pittsburgh or Pennsylvania region, the Eastern Ohio region, destined for Chicago in the Midwest, and on the other hand, the reverse of that, where we have density in lanes coming from the Midwest along the Ohio and Indiana Turnpike back into Pennsylvania and Eastern Ohio. These points represent a lot of volume. PGT Trucking has currently regular movements of this material moving between these points on typical conventional tractor trailer units. And it's we talk about lane density, which for us means we have a lot of this. There's a lot of these movements. And we are just one trucking company. There's several others. We may have 10 to 15% of the market. And this problem that we continually have at PGT Trucking, where we can't find enough drivers, like many other trucking companies, is addressed by the locomotion solution, and that's why we're so interested in this. We feel this lane can be easily addressed. And the roadway is already in place. We have the turnpikes that are 3-lane divided, mostly flat, level lanes. Very easy to run this equipment for us to begin these operations. Next slide. This is what the future brings for us after we master the Chicago to Pittsburgh and reverse lane. These are also lanes that we can tap into that have high volume and high dense shipments that we would begin to look at after we master the lane between Pittsburgh and Chicago. Next slide. One of the other benefits of this program with locomotion is the carbon reduction. Our customers, mostly steel companies, are very interested in the carbon reduction benefit of this, as well as the ability for us to get their material moved a little easier. So we're presenting to our customers not only more equipment and better and quicker movements, but also carbon reduction. Next slide. We're branding, along with locomotion, the trailers. In fact, this is a prototype. I think we're having these done right now. So sometime between second quarter and third quarter of next year, if you travel the Ohio Turnpike and the Indiana Turnpike, you'll see this equipment running back and forth. Next slide. This is just a statement from our CEO, Pat Gallagher, and our commitment to what we call the future of flatbed regarding both addressing supply chain issues and the driver shortage, as well as carbon reduction in the environment. And that's my presentation. Thank you.
All right. Thanks, Gregg. Again, another great presentation. I hope the audience is getting a lot out of this, because I certainly did. This concludes the presentation portion of our program, and I would like to thank all of our speakers for their great presentations. We'll now try to get to the Q&A session. Still have time to input any questions that you have for our speakers. in that section on the right hand of your screen, and you may also upvote the questions you would like to be answered. Some pre-canned questions that we have for our presenters, and these are for all three. If you guys want to put on your cameras and your microphones, that'd be greatly appreciated. All right. From each of your perspectives, what are the biggest challenges associated, you think, with platooning? And I'll go to Gregg first.
Well, for us in particular, thank you, Kevin. For us in particular, we're working in teams with Lochrane. I think we have a total of 20 people, 10 from PGT and 10 from Lochrane, to work the logistics of feeding the autonomous vehicles, the relay vehicles on the turnpike, having enough material, loaded trailers basically, ready to go when that vehicle, when the team shows up at one of the marshalling yards. So we have a lot of work to do to prepare feeding that train back and forth on the turnpike. And those drawings that I showed you are part of the work that we've done to try to get that addressed. We do have enough business. It's just about getting the freight picked up and getting it to the marshalling yards to keep those trucks rolling.
Okay. Elise.
Yes, thank you. I would say, the biggest challenge that I see from an infrastructure owner-operator perspective is the navigation of the various legalities throughout the differing agencies that you transfer between from an origin to a destination, and really trying to navigate those various waters and understanding the specificities associated with each agency's requirements.
Okay. And last but not least, Taylor.
I think from a research perspective, my questions would be, how can we best support this safe operation and platooning from the IOO perspective? So that's where I look at the challenges is, what questions should we be investing in answering and help learn more and how we can help this industry grow.
Okay. Again, a question for all of you. What are the best and most positive developments you see with platooning? I'll start with Elise.
Okay, well, I would say, the best thing that I can see is this relationship that, Gregg was speaking about. It is the fact that you have this ADS platooning technology. It's actually being implemented in real world scenarios. It's no longer this kind of science-y project. It is actually something that is really out there and really for its operability and its use. I think that's the biggest advancement in this space, beyond the existence even of the technology in the first place.
Okay. Taylor.
Yeah, I think, from the platooning perspective, there's just so much opportunity. I think we're just in the beginning. And I think the companies are really pursuing excellence with the best way they can to deliver this technology. And I really see a huge opportunity to improve capacity on a freeway, help us move peoples and goods across our country, across states more efficiently. So there's just a huge opportunity, I think, from a system level, performance level that we see in this technology that's coming.
Okay. And Gregg.
Yeah, for us, and we all are familiar with the supply chain issue that's affecting everybody and probably throughout the world, but particularly here in the U.S. A lot of that is driven from insufficient truck supply, which emanates from not enough drivers. So I'll give you a number that may shock you a little bit. We're at 1,000 truck fleet. We've hired about 362 drivers so far this year, and we've lost about 362 drivers this year for a net gain of no drivers. But an incredible effort and an incredible amount of money spent to recruit drivers and train them.
Yeah.
This is the most beneficial part for me in working with Lochrane is I can tell my customers I'm doing something about it. I'm engaging in technology to solve this problem.
Sure.
They can't get their material moved, and my job is to move their material.
Yeah. I mean, it was an interesting fact. I don't know what presentation it was, but the average age of a truck driver is over 50 years of age. So, yeah, obviously it's not a profession that a lot of young people are going into. Um, as all of you know, this technology changes basically on a daily basis. So, I mean, we're always getting updated with new things and new advancements. What do you feel this was going to look like in the next 5 years or so? And I'll throw that out to anybody who wants to answer first.
All right, I'll go. Well, first of all, I think we're going to see autonomous vehicles in many different forms. It won't be such a unique sighting. And I've been in a Too Simple vehicle in Arizona earlier this year that traveled 70 miles without the driver touching the steering wheel. 35 miles out and 35 miles back. Cross traffic, merging on an interstate, stop signs, red lights, pretty amazing. So it's working now. It can only get better. So I think we're going to see in 5 years, probably less, a lot more of this, and it's going to be common.
Okay. We'll go with Elise.
I'll agree, just really doubling down on what Gregg has said. I think that you're going to see a lot more normalization of this technology across the board and a lot better of an understanding of what the real intent behind this technology is. I think there's a false expectation that has been kind of spread in the recent years that this technology is anti, truck driver, that it's taking this away, this industry away from those drivers that are out there. And I think that is just, it's not the case. And there's education associated with the fact that this is there to be able to support the industry and be able to allow it to further expand. So I think as we see that normalization, we're going to see it being utilized just a lot more, because it's going to come down to the fact that the dollars and cents are just logically behind the utilization of this technology.
Right. And driver shortages is really going to drive this, I think. No pun intended.
Yeah, I guess when we all were kind of quiet from the beginning, it's a kind of an example that this technology moves so fast that we're kind of still trying to understand where and when it's going to be where at some point in time. But I think, you have the best and brightest minds in our country working to solve these problems. From a research perspective, it's more of a hot topic right now with everyone looking at all the different factors related to truck platooning and how they can best solve some of these challenges ahead of us. So I think we're going to be a lot further than we can even imagine in 5 years, especially with industry, backing of these use cases that we're talking about today that really have tangible value.
Right. Okay. Somebody wanted to say something? No. Okay. We do have time for some of the questions we have in our Q&A. Who approved the Lochrane use case ODD, and how was tort liability of the infrastructure owner-operator considered addressed?
Well, I am assuming that question is for me with regards to our specific demonstration, but feel free, Gregg and Taylor, if you have input on this, jump right in, but I'll take a stab at it first. So, really focusing, on the operational design domain associated with kind of the need here is we went and we did through, I believe it was Ohio DOT, an RFI request for partners for moving this demonstration forward. So we actually went out and we requested this partnership, saying we want to showcase this piece. And so I think that, really helped to look at, we identified what that use case was. And then they came to us and they said, this is how we would go about doing that. And this is how we would utilize technology in our own way to be able to move this forward. And really looking at that from kind of a user-driven perspective, I think really helped when you started to look at like the infrastructure owner infrastructure owner operator liability with the whole initiative, because it was something that we prompted them to do. It helped smooth out a lot of those edges when it comes to that liability, because it wasn't something where we had a technology company coming to us saying, hey, I want to showcase this on your roadways, where you have a lot more of that legalese that you got to work your way through. So because of the process in which we did the demonstration, it protected the infrastructure owner operated a lot more from that kind of liability associated.
Okay.
I can comment too. Obviously, insurance and liability is a big question for us regarding this. Lochrane isn't here, so they can't comment on that, but our agreement with them includes the fact that they have to provide quite a bit of protection for us, at least in the early days.
Sure.
They make a product, and they probably have to do with product liability as well as other aspects of this. And we, as a trucking company, probably have a hard time finding somebody to write a policy for something like this. So our partnership calls for us to work together to solve these problems, and we're doing that.
Okay. Taylor, anything to add?
I don't have anything to add for this question.
Another Lochrane question. Did Lochrane request, and this is probably for Elise, did Lochrane request any infrastructure information, such as work zone data, pavement marking, shoulder width, and any other information, or V2X installations to RSUs?
So, kind of per my presentation, they did request all the data. They wanted everything in as real time as we could get it to them. So we looked at the opportunity to utilize RSUs to transmit that information. However, the information that they wanted and the route that was taken really didn't allow us to be able to showcase the transmission of that data via RSU. That being said, all of those pieces that are in the question, work zone, pavement markings, shoulder width, all those pieces are items that we do have a fairly accurate data set on. I do want to kind of reiterate, just kind of from my presentation, one of the biggest challenges is that there is no standardization for how frequent you collect and relay this data. Obviously, the work zone data is a different animal, because since this time, the work zone data exchange has kind of existed, and they've started establishing these standards for the ways in which you both relay the information, but what is contained within the data and how often it is refreshed. But when you start looking at, perfect example, a pavement marking quality, it is such a dynamic data set that, as frequent as it is collected, if it is not done via a connected infrastructure point, it's going to immediately be inaccurate, just because of the way in which the infrastructure itself works. So there are pieces of the puzzle there that, that standardization needing to exist from that data collection transmission standpoint, and that expectation of real world, accurate data sets is just something that's going to need to be refined over time, and really trying to look at technological solutions to on-the-fly evaluation of the condition of those pavement markings and the shoulder widths.
Well, it's not only the pavement markings, but I think the condition of the roads. In the future, do you think that will have a really big impact on platooning moving forward?
Well, I would, I can take a stab at that, but I would very much like to throw it to, our research expert on the panel, because I think he's going to have the best answer for that question. I will say, I've heard a lot about the standardization, international rating scores for roadways, and I know that that's being investigated as well. But I think to me, the idea that, this technology isn't going to work unless everything is perfect is this fantasy world. That folks know that you can't rely on that perfect road or that A+ road or whatever. You're going to have to figure out how to utilize the technology in a less than excellent scenario. So I'll throw it to you, Taylor. I'm sure you have a more relevant perspective on this.
And that's where I think our research in CDA is why we're here to try to understand those questions. Again, of course, slippery pavement could affect performance of a roadway user. And so, how can we work with our infrastructure office to understand the data that we can collect, and then what's valuable? And like you said, the rate in which we share that data to our partners. And I guess, like I was writing notes out, one thing I wrote down here is we can learn a lot about what's going on today with the questions that are coming out from these experiments and from these drives going back and forth. Hey, we would like this data. Oh, it's not there. Oh, these standards are missing. And I think that's where we can really, step in and work and learn and try to figure out how do we work with our SDOs and what standards are missing, where the gaps, how can we best support those to help get those pushed forward. But one of the major use cases we have is weather, and we looked at icy road conditions as one of the ones we wanted to test. Unfortunately, when we went to Michigan in September, there's no icy road conditions, so we had to fake it, say it was ice, but it was just a capability of identifying it. I think we can do that, and then it's relaying that information in the right format at the right time. And making that information available for road users and companies to use that information to best plan their routes or trajectories around those conditions ahead.
Now, Gregg, being, and I'll look to you as being obviously the practical user of the roads, because you're the one who has the trucking company. How do you think that's going to affect your cooperation with Lochrane, or your agreement with Lochrane moving forward with the condition of roads? I mean, is that a big factor that you looked at before you delved into this?
It was a factor. I don't know. I don't think it was a big factor, but it certainly was a factor, and it's one of the reasons that we chose this lane to start. The Ohio Turnpike and the Indiana Turnpike seem to be ideally situated in terms of the condition of the road, the level of the road. It just seemed to be a perfect place to start. And I didn't think we probably didn't spend a whole lot of time worrying about the condition of that road because we already knew how it is.
Okay. All right. Question for Taylor. What level of funding does CARMA receive on an annual basis for operations and research and investments?
That's a really good question. So our funding fluctuates year to year because we have to compete with all DOT priorities. But on average, our funding is between $2 and $8 million a year. Again, it fluctuates, but that's been our funding level. And now with the new infrastructure bill that's coming, we're going to wait and see what the legislation has, for research, and then again what priorities the administration has for us to pursue. And so that number may go up this year, may go down. It all depends on where the department is prioritizing needs.
Okay. Question for Gregg. Has PGT tested with Lochrane on any public roads without a safety driver in both trucks anywhere? And has this occurred on a test track, or what were the public roads?
Okay, we have actually not tested anything yet. Our plan is to begin testing second quarter next year. We're still working on all the details, and we have a target date of second quarter next year to start testing.
Okay. Lochrane noted in one of their earlier presentations that they intend to implement a linked convoy approach where the driver in the second truck is in the berth. How is the Smart Belt Coalition preparing for this approach?
Well, I would say with regards to, the Smart Belt Coalition, we are not, entirely focused on the variety of differing technologies associated with how the platooning occurs. Our next steps moving forward is really focusing on the ways in which we can facilitate the existence of this technology in this part of the country in a more advanced way, making linkages between the offerings associated with the data sets, really trying to bring a common location to all of that information and a way to navigate that, as well as starting to draw up, the conversations between the trucking community, the technologists, as well as the infrastructure owner operators, to start having those conversations surrounding the data needs, data expectancy, and really looking at the ways in which we can facilitate that. So I would say with regards specifically to this question, we are in support of this technology as a whole and wanting to ensure that we can move it forward in any way that we can. So I would say that that larger preparation of streamlining the efforts between the organizations is going to help move forward all varieties of this technology.
Okay. Next question, and this is probably going to depend more so on each state's legislation, but did the platoons involve more than 2 trucks?
For us, well, since we haven't started yet, there isn't anything that's happened so far for us. However, our plan is to begin with 2 trucks. I think that in our minds, we believe we can expand on that, but all of our discussions are surrounding 2 trucks.
Okay. Anybody else want to add to that? I mean, do you foresee this as, a platoon of maybe 4 or 5 trucks, or do you just don't think that we're ever going to get to that point?
Well, I'm sorry.
Go ahead, Taylor.
I would say from a research perspective, we're looking at all combinations. We've done tests with our passenger fleet up to 5 vehicle platoons. So we have data on the performance of 5 vehicles, and the things we're seeing, it's all about, how many platoons are operating in the vicinity at the same time. And it's all about the other human drivers that are there, providing enough gaps or space so they can maneuver through these groups of trucks eventually. But so we're looking at it from that perspective, and then what's the role of infrastructure and providing specific rules to help manage that so that it doesn't become a distraction to drivers around them. But we've tested all those different combinations, so the results have been really positive.
Interesting. Okay. You think that's something the Smart Belt Coalition would look into at some point, Elise?
Oh, I would imagine so. Again, really wanting to focus on the ways in which we can facilitate this kind of advanced trucking community throughout that area. I think it's going to need to be something that we look at and focus on. We would be remiss in neglecting to, allow for a variety of differing, truck counts associated with that platoon. So I would say that we almost would have
to. Okay. Question for Gregg. Will PGT run double trailers as part of a platoon?
That's a great question. We haven't thought about that. We talked about a variety of different combinations. We do run doubles now, 1 tractor, 2 trailers, but we have not talked about running 2 trailers in the convoy, automated convoy.
Okay, all right. What are the next steps and any future goals of the Smart Belt Coalition?
Sure. So I would say, we have kind of a long-term vision associated with the Smart Belt Coalition, and that's really surrounding, we've got the safety, mobility, operability, and the electrification that we very much want to focus on. So right now, our priority in the past has been on the truck platooning demonstration and then wanting to focus on this kind of, data portal to be able to facilitate the larger acceptance of this technology in this area. But then moving forward, we also plan on looking into opportunities associated with electrification and the way in which we can, perhaps not specifically with kind of truck platooning, but facilitate the larger pool of kind of transformational technologies that do tend to coexist within this connected automated vehicle, and trucking and electrification type perspective. So that's kind of our next steps, is how can we move this forward, because we've realized also from the truck platooning perspective that this initiative is something that really would benefit the nation as a whole, to try to figure out how can we draw the lines between these various states and try to ensure that we have that smoothing of all of the differing policies and trying to best understand those limitations.
Okay. Unfortunately, we're out of time. I mean, boy, that flew by quick. When you talk an hour, you think forever, huh? Definitely want to thank all of you for speaking today. Very interesting topics. I know I learned a lot, and it was a very thoughtful discussion and a lot of great questions we had. Unfortunately, this concludes the last day of the summit, and I want to thank everyone for attending this year's summit and sticking with us through this virtual platform. Hopefully, Next year will be in person. So with that, check your emails after the conference for any information for your PDH credits. And we will be sending out a summary of the program in the coming months, so be on the lookout for that as well. I guess I get the great privilege of summing everything up. Thanks again to everyone for sponsors. We really appreciate that, and this makes this conference go. Definitely for supporting the summit. Their contributions make this summit possible. And mark your calendars for next year's PAAV Summit, which will be held October 25th through the 27th in Pittsburgh at the Marriott City Center. We're looking forward to being in person again and can't wait to continue these important discussions that we've had at this year's summit, and we hope to see you all there. We will now exit the presentation mode and go back into the conference room mode, where you still have some time and the ability to chat with other attendees if you would like. Otherwise, we hope to see you at next year's summit. And thank you again.